Rotary colleagues and friends in peace. I am Jim Halderman, the chair of the District 5450 Peace Committee. Tonight, we will hear about the challenges stemming from lack of water in the Colorado River. The end of the Colorado River Compact is also very near, and the challenges that brings. So what can Rotary do? With a very impressive resume, we are fortunate tonight to have Dr. David Stewart from Stewart Environmental Consultants Incorporated, and also adjunct professor at CSU. David, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. So I'm going to bring, Zoom is not the easiest thing to run, but I'm going to bring up what I think is the screen. So what do you see now?
Yeah, hit start. You're there.
There it is.
Okay. So it's at the presentation now?
Yes. Yeah, it's
okay.
shown.
Okay. So a little background. I've been working in water for about 40 years. I've got a bachelor's and PhD from Colorado State and a master's from the University of Arizona. Part of my work has been trying to preserve the history of water resources in the West. And so I do a lot of work with the various water archive at Colorado State, as well as others. Big part of our archive has a lot of history on the Colorado River, as you can imagine. So the first part of this is to kind of walk through what I think is areas of conflict. I don't know if you're okay. So areas of conflict and water and peace. I first ran into this when I was used to be president of Engineers Without Borders for the U.S. And we had a meeting in Washington, and it was sponsored by the Gates Foundation. But at that meeting in 2010, we had two engineers join us from one was from Palestine and one was from Israel. And it had never occurred to me that water would be such a huge conflict. And so, but in reality, the Jordan River in the Middle East has had conflicts since the 1920s. And in the 1950s, Eisenhower actually sent a delegation there to help with that, understanding the water sharing and how does that work with Jordan and the Palestinian settlements in Israel. They actually did a report on that, and what the takeaway from that report was that water doesn't follow political boundaries. It has no relationship to political boundaries. It is purely a geographical system. And so the takeaway from that study and that delegation was that nothing is solved without people coming together to discuss the issues. That then came to another talk that I gave with Bill Tempson. So Bill is a professor at Colorado State University. He's a Fulbright scholar. He's been a Fulbright scholar, I don't know, 5 or 6 times. He is also a peace scholar. He's doing a lot of work in Burundi right now, where they had a genocide issue. But what he really found was that peace can happen if you involve infrastructure, and where he found that was in Ireland. So what he found there was that you get people to find a common ground. In this particular talk, that common ground is water, but you try to resolve that using peacefully using that common ground. What I've been promoting, and I'll talk a little bit about a project that we've started in our district, but what I've been promoting is this education through Rotary clubs and the connection and sharing of the four-way test. And so I think that's really important. Our project, our Colorado River project, has two phases. The first phase is an educational phase. One of the things about Rotary that makes it unique is that it doesn't have what I would say, well, let me back up. One of the things that I run into a lot is that I work in water circles. And so I've known that the Colorado River is going to have issues for a long time. And most of the water people have understood that. The public doesn't understand that. And the advantage that a Rotary Club has is that it's usually made up of community leaders. So by utilizing that network of Rotarians, what we hope to do is provide one, education, and then two, in 2024, we're exploring having a conference and unique ways of sharing that water. So our proposal right now is we're raising $88,000 to do that. And Rotary clubs right now are about 15% of the funding. We've gone to the Gates Family Foundation, and it appears that they're going to move forward with a grant, for a matching grant. And then we're raising funds from smaller sources around the 7 states. There are 1,300 Rotary clubs in the 7 states that comprise the water, the Colorado River water. That's about 10 to 15,000 Rotarians. And what we hope to do is educate club members on how the Colorado River is a resource to all of us. That compact actually runs out in 2026. And that's really important that we understand that. It's not that the compact goes away, but the compact is a political thing. And so what we're going to find is that the 7 states are California, Nevada, Arizona. That comprises the lower basin. And then the upper basin is Utah, Wyoming, Colorado, and New Mexico. So out of those 7 states, California and Congress could outvote us all other 6 states involved. So we don't believe that the compact is going to dissolve, but we've got to be able to use our ability to help negotiate that. A good example of that is this year, the Bureau of Reclamation has asked the 7 states to come up with 2 to 4 million acre feet of water and save that much water. That's a very difficult task. So in the middle 2000s, we knew there was going to be a shortage, and so we worked on it, and we came up with ways to share the water among the 7 states. And that took about 3 years to come up with that negotiation. We had that same negotiation again combined with Mexico. So part of our international treaty is that we deliver so much water to Mexico. And so we had to come up with a way to save, to again figure out how to save water and share it in 2015, and that took us about 18 months. This year, when the Bureau came up with it, they said you have to save 2 to 4 million acre feet, and they gave everybody 6 weeks to come up with that plan. Obviously, that didn't happen. What the upper basin states said is we have a right to 7.5 million acre feet, and we only use 3 to 3.5. So this is a lower basin issue. The lower basin is saying, well, while we use 10 million acre feet, we need every drop of that. And so they've been overdrawing on both Lake Powell and Lake Mead. So one of the things that we need to do is have business leader and community leaders become involved, because this is all fighting amongst people who are in the water business. So when you look at then our project that we're trying to put together, we're working with the Center of the American West at the University of Colorado. We're going to bring together all the parties. So it'll be the 7 states, the native tribes, energy users. So one of the things that a lot of people don't realize is how much energy is generated by both Lake Mead and Lake Powell. And it's significant. The reason that you can grow a lot of crops in the Central Valley of California is because they get power from Lake Mead at about 3 cents a kilowatt. Probably in your home, you're paying anywhere from 7 to 10 cents a kilowatt. So the power that's generated by Lake Mead and Lake Powell is very, very, very inexpensive. We also have agricultural interests, and one of our committee members is a water attorney, and the thing he always says is that he likes to have romaine lettuce in February. That doesn't happen without the Imperial Irrigation District, and so the Imperial Irrigation District is absolutely a huge user of this water. We also have the municipal and industrial users as well. 40 million people depend on the Colorado River as their water source. So the video that we're putting together right now will be a 25-minute video, and I'll go through what it covers, but it's really it's giving all the background that I'm giving you right now. Then we're going to have an expert panel that will stream into the Rotary Club meeting, and they'll be there to answer questions as an expert panel. And these are being coordinated by both Rotary and the Center of the American West. So that's a big part of what we're doing there. And what we're hoping to do is get a discussion going on all the interests during this presentation. The whole project is built on the 4-way test. So we're presenting this information, how to peacefully negotiate this water sharing among all the affected entities. And I think that's going to be critical, because if you look at the 4-way test as kind of a peace scenario there, it's really important that we are discussing all these issues about, is it fair, is it will it benefit everybody, not just myself. And I think what happened in the original compact is that 2 things happened. One, the politicians said we've got more water than we actually have, and 2, we'll just split it between the upper and lower basins, and how we manage it within our own basins is up to us. So for example, the lower basin does not account for evaporation. That's significant. That's about 1 million acre feet a year. And so one of the things we're going to have to do is figure out how that works. In Colorado, we count groundwater that's next to the stream. We call it tributary groundwater. In Arizona and parts of California, they don't do that. They say that no, that's groundwater, that's separate, which is not true from a factual standpoint. The groundwater is part of the river. So and at the end of that video, what we're going to do is have a call to action. So we're going to have these Rotarians contact their local water agencies and see how that's going to affect their community. Then contact the state water commissioner. Every state, every one of the 7 states have a water commissioner. But where this will really be negotiated is in Congress. So they're going to want to contact their U.S. representatives and really get people that are not normally associated with this water issue. And Rotarians can play a absolutely wonderful role in that.
Yeah.
So the video is kind of made up of the following. We're going to explain who the users are. And we're going to talk about what's happening now. It's interesting. If you go back to the history of the Colorado River, one of the things you find is that in 1920, when a lot of the data was being put together, there were hydrologists that said, yes, today we can say that there's 15 million acre feet in the river with some confidence, but understand that that's not going to be the norm, that it's going to go higher than that and lower than that. And for the first probably 80 years, that worked fine. But then the drought started to happen in mid to late 90s, and we've been on a downward slide ever since. We're also going to talk about people like Delph Carpenter, who interestingly was the guy that came up with the compact. He said that each of the states could be a sovereign entity, and why that's why we have this compact. It's among the 7 states. The other 53 or 43 states do not participate in this discussion. It is mainly the 7 states. We're then going to talk about what the negative studies are, the negative part of this, and what the positive part of this in this video, so that we can show negative part is that we don't have enough water. Another negative is that the tribes have never been involved in any of the negotiation. There are 27 tribes on the Colorado River that have water rights that are senior to anything in the compact. So they have the ability to theoretically get into that. The issue is that they never used it. So there's a doctrine that says that they should have enough water to provide whatever it is that they're trying to do. That's going to be a negotiation point that will be difficult to have. We're going to talk about what each state has as issues. Colorado is probably it is the biggest resource of water for the Colorado River. It's all of our snowmelt. With what's happening on climate change, we're not able to make that up. However, by the compact, we have to release things. So I live in Fort Collins, Colorado. We get water from the Colorado Big Thompson project. So it starts there at the headwaters, comes through Shadow Mountain Lake and into Grand Lake, and then it comes through the mountains and ends up in Estes Park. That water could be, we divert about 250,000 acre feet a year. If there's a call on the river, that water's in jeopardy. So the Front Range would be short 250,000 acre feet. That is a significant issue to agriculture, to our industry, to the communities. So there are things that we really need to understand better than what we are right now. So this is innovative because we're getting Rotarians involved rather than water people. I find that the water people are full of data. They try to argue their points that support their viewpoints. They are not looking to the 4-way test to say what is fair, is it the truth, all of these different things. So I think that Rotarian viewpoint provides a very unique way of looking at that. And one of my co-sponsors on this is Patty Limerick. Patty is at the University of Colorado, and is very well known for her ability to bring diverse groups together. So when we were having all this oil and gas issues in Colorado, Patty was able to bring people together and talk about it. Not that they all agreed, but at least you could have a good conversation. The second phase of this is to have this conference in 2024. The original compact in 1922 was really came together with a Nevada senator, and he was not a water expert, but he knew the value of water and why it was going to be so important to us. And so he really was the one that got it going through Congress, that kind of stuff. And he knew that water would be important and limited to the future. So the compact was negotiated, but didn't include a provision for less water, which is where we are today. And politicians always want more water. So what I want and what I have are two different things. So we need to have this discussion regarding water use and sharing that meet the four-way test. And as it relates to a peace concept, then I go back to my original slide, which was talking about Israel, Jordan, and the Palestinian settlements. I was fascinated when I was with EWB, when I was president of EWB, of having these two engineers who don't agree on anything politically, but they realized that they had to share the water, that was never an issue. So none of the infrastructure, water infrastructure, has ever been attacked in those three areas. And that's important because it has to serve everybody. We are in a very similar situation for Colorado, on the Colorado River. We have to figure out a way to make that work. So with that, I'll stop sharing my slides and be happy to take questions.
Wow.
Wow, Dave, this is not looking pretty. And I know recently Phoenix was still charging a flat fee for water. Tucson had to charge by the drop. I don't know if that's still the case.
I'm not sure. Phoenix, I think, was moving more to away from that flat rate. Fort Collins had that flat rate until about the middle of the 90s. And then we all went to meters. And in fact, they've got a where they calculate how much water you should use for your lawn, for example. And then if you go over that, there's a huge disincentive for that, financial disincentive. I think that works well. We've been able to save a lot of water by doing that, but that's something that we have to actually come to grips with.
Vicenzi, you have a question?
What is the educational aspect of this program? Do you reach students in schools or universities or communities? That is question one. And how are you harvesting the knowledge that the tribal groups have along the Colorado River in order to sustain the water flow?
So the tribes are very involved. I'll answer your second question first. The tribes are very involved in this water renegotiation of the compact. They've never had a seat at the table, and today they do. So that they are represented by this consortium of the 27 tribes, and they will absolutely be part of that. The biggest problem that the tribes have is, for example, the Gila River right now tribe has quite a bit of water. The Gila River flows about, in 1920, the Gila River delivered about 3 million acre feet to the Colorado River. This is prior to any of the agriculture being part of what happens along the Gila. Today, that's not true, but Arizona, as part of the negotiating among the 3 states, Arizona never recognized the 3 million acre feet that were being delivered. In Colorado, we can't do that. We have a prior appropriation system, and all water is accounted for. So this difference between states and how Colorado recognizes groundwater, how Arizona and California don't recognize groundwater, that's all going to have to be part of this overall discussion about sharing and how it's fair to everybody.
And that's really large because Phoenix feels they have the world's largest reservoir underneath that aquifer, but is not their aquifer basically filled through the groundwater from the Colorado River?
Right. So that'll be a big issue for them. The first part of that question was, how do we involve students? So what we're hoping to do is to use this video to get Rotarians more involved in this aspect of the Colorado River. And I think that will be a very important part of this overall project.
Thank you.
And Vasanti is joining us tomorrow morning from India. Thank you, Vasanti. It's glad to have you with us.
If I have a minute, I want to share something on the work we do with schools here, if time permits.
Time permits, if you can be brief, Vasanti. We have many questions. Please, go ahead.
Yeah. Here we have a lot of conflict on water, and you have newspaper items where 2 farmers will be fighting over water, and they will block the water. So we'll have murders and things like that. So what we do is cut those newspaper items and give it to the students and have them debate on how things can be shared peacefully. This, on October 19th, also, we are doing one session for 300 girls on peace negotiations in terms of sharing water. And I live by the water. I live at a place called Chembarambakam. And in 2018, when I had my East-West Center APLP groups come in for about 19 countries, we did a session on living by the water space and why civilizations grow around water. Thank you, Jim.
Thank you. That was great. Great story. You had mentioned it. I had one question come in earlier that Lake Powell loses 9% of its water by evaporation. Is there anything we can do about that?
Well, actually there is. I mean, Arizona is a good example of that. They're taking Colorado River water and storing it underground. Evaporation essentially disappears when you do that. So and California is doing the same thing. They've got between Palm Desert and Blythe, they've got an area where they're injecting Colorado River water as a storage reservoir. So these are some of the innovative things that we can be doing as the 7 states to better manage this water. The first thing we have to do is come up with how much water do we have, and how are we going to share that. And then once we have that, then we can come up with new technologies. So, for example, the lower basin states paid for cloud seeding in Wyoming and Colorado. And that actually increased the amount of water from the upper basin by about 3 to 4%. So that is something that we're looking at. We've got other technologies that we can use to do that in our agricultural area. But I think we also have to come to grips as a community that the biggest user of water is agriculture. And so if you're going to ask a farmer to give up that water for whatever reason, we're going to have to pay for that. So you got to pay the farmer. And And a lot of people don't want to do that. They just want the water. Well, that's not how that's going to work. So we got to again look at what's fair to everybody.
It's great. Greg Klein has some questions from Ohio.
Thank you, Jim. Basic question.
Craig, you're breaking down.
Place.
You're frozen, Craig. I'm sorry.
Is that better?
Better.
Okay. The questions about the compact, the one that is currently in place dates back to when?
It was originally signed by 6 of the 7 states in 1922. And Arizona held out. And the reason Arizona held out is that they wanted funding for the Central Arizona project. So California agreed to allow them to get funding for that. In return, Arizona had to be the first one that didn't get their allocation. So that was a negotiated piece of that. So the compact actually it doesn't expire. The existing structure of the compact ends in 2026.
All right. So during all this time, no one ever did projection studies as to how long the water might actually last?
We did, but I think one of the problems that we have is that climate change and aridification is happening, and nobody anticipated that having the impact that it does. So, for example, all the water that we have in Colorado, most of it is in the form of snow and ice, but because a lot of the land doesn't have the moisture, creates dust storms. The dust storms then end up on the snow, and it melts faster.
Okay.
So it's hard to predict those kind of things.
Okay, thank you for those answers. I appreciate it. I thought that what the response you just gave was probably the case. So appreciate it. Thanks.
You bet.
In the 70s and 80s, there was a lot of conversation about gray water. Is that still on the table?
Absolutely. But gray water is more about reusing a small portion of it in, for example, in your house, or putting it on your garden or lawn. Those are subsequent uses. And for example, in Colorado, we've got a gray water law, so you can do that. Some municipalities don't like it, but the reality is that it is something that's there. Our biggest users, though, are still ag, and so we've got to figure out what to do to help them through this situation.
Yeah, I found it interesting. We do an awfully lot in Africa and other countries about efficient farming, but we don't seem to be doing much with it in our country.
We are, but a lot of people don't do it. I'll give you another example. In Colorado, well, in almost all the 7 states, we have a program of water rights that's called prior appropriation. So first in time, first in right. And so if I'm a water user and I've got I get a certain water right, that's a diversion that says I can have 100 acre feet. I have no incentive to save water. I get that 100 acre feet, and if I don't get that 100 acre feet, if I don't take that 100 acre feet, I lose it. So there's no incentive for me to save water because I'll lose my water right. So part of this whole renegotiation has to be, we're gonna ask the farmer to become more efficient, and as we do that, they're going to cut back on their water right. They should get a payment for that. whatever it is. It could be a yearly payment. It could be a one-time payment. I mean, there are many ways to figure that out. But water in Colorado, in Fort Collins right now, we use CBT water. When I was first starting in a lot of the water rights and water reuse areas that I work in, Colorado Big Thompson, you could buy a share of Colorado Big Thompson for about $500. That was probably in 1985. Today, it's $100,000 to buy one share. So that's $100,000 an acre foot.
Well, David, you used an acronym at the beginning that I was not familiar with.
CBT, Colorado Big Thompson.
Oh, yes.
It's a project that we have where we bring water over from the west slope to the east slope.
Major river where the straws are coming in from the western slope through the mountain, feed the
That is
river that
correct.
comes down in and feed the northern Colorado.
Right.
In a lot of research I did, I found that bottom line, the Iran-Iraq war was largely over water. Iraq was starting to dam up the Tigris Euphrates and cutting off some of the Iran sources. Are you familiar with that?
I'm familiar with it. I'm certainly not an expert at it, but we have the same issue here, right? I mean, I could, as Colorado, if we didn't have this compact, I could withhold a bunch of water. And yet I've got this compact where I have to deliver so much water.
Carol, I owe you an apology. Your hand is on a very light background. I didn't see it. Please go ahead.
That's okay. I was wondering, David, if any of the farmers or anyone who's talking about hydroponic, are you able to hear me?
You broke up just.
Open.
Yeah, my internet said it was messing up here.
You're good now.
Let me try again. I'm wondering about hydroponic. I haven't heard any mention of that in this discussion. And if we're giving money to farmers eventually, could that be written so that they convert to hydroponic gardens?
As certainly could be part of it. You know, technology is going to be a big piece of how we're going to solve this issue. The compact was at the time in 1920, we were getting an average of about 18 million acre feet into the Colorado River. So when the politicians negotiated that, they said, okay, well, we'll bring that down to 15 million acre feet and we'll split it. So the lower basin gets 7.5, the upper basin gets 7.5. Colorado and Wyoming and New Mexico and Utah were in favor of that because we didn't have the population. And yet we knew that someday we would want to be able to use that water. The lower basin states did have that population, mainly Arizona and California. So as it relates to technologies like hydroponics, that's absolutely going to be part of this discussion. How do I make these farms more efficient? Jim brought up gray water. You could have vertical farming in towns or in cities. Vertical farming is a really good way to raise crops and don't have any transportation costs to get it to where you need it to go. So these are issues that are hopefully going to be part of the overall discussion, but absolutely hydroponics would be part of that.
I have two questions. One, when I moved here in 1990, I became aware that we were not allowed to capture water in a rain barrel for flowers or plants. I understand that's off. I don't know. But the bigger one is I'm aware of one city in Colorado that has finally said enough. They have stopped development north of Pueblo, south of Colorado Springs somewhere. When are all of the communities in the West that are creating well, I won't say creating this issue, but when are we going to say enough?
It will, I think that will happen as a financial issue. So, like in Colorado, like in Fort Collins, most the city and the water districts want you to supply CBT water, or there's a really good irrigation company that you can get water from. That's all at $100,000 an acre foot. Each home takes about a third of an acre foot of water if you include outside irrigation. So when you look at a third of an acre foot, that means that a starter home, before you break ground, do anything, you've got a bill for $33,000. And that's just the raw water charge. So that doesn't include streets, it doesn't include electricity, it doesn't include natural gas, any of those kinds of things. So I think it'll be a financial issue. What we are seeing is that there is a lot of water in Colorado that is what I call brackish. That means that it's got a salt content of 2 to 3 to 5,000 milligrams per liter. Your drinking water typically is around 100. So this water is very treatable. People have avoided it because it costs money. You have to send it through a membrane process in order to clean it up. So that's caused I'm seeing that as a paradigm shift. I'm gonna have a dual water system, so I'm gonna irrigate all the lawns with groundwater, and then I'm going to purify my drinking water, but I'm only going to do that for indoor use only, which is only 5% of the flow. So I can make that argument and bring the cost down of a housing project.
But again, the high tap fees hurt the poor that can't afford housing now.
Absolutely. So affordable housing, we've got to find a solution for affordable housing. But as a developer, or not as a developer, as most people don't make the connection between a water tap and affordable housing. And the reason the water tap is so expensive is because of the raw water cost. It's not the other things, it's the raw water cost. So when you run out of water, the cost of development goes sky high. That's happening in St. George, Utah. So the state wants to build a water line from Lake Powell to St. George. There's not enough water in Lake Powell to build a water. I mean, that just seems foolish to me. But they've got the funding to make it happen. And Utah wants their, whatever their allocation is.
They're talking about building a dam on one of the rivers.
No, it's already there. Lake Powell has Glen Canyon Dam.
No,
So
I'm talking about the community near Las Vegas in Utah.
yes,
Virginia River, is it?
that Virgin River, yes,
Virgin River that goes through the small development.
right. That's right. I did see in the chat that somebody wanted my email address. So Jim, you're free to share that with the group. I'd be happy.
Be more than happy to share that and more. Yes. I'm intrigued. Let's go back to the Gila River. The Gila River Reservoir is one of the largest reservoirs in Arizona. It's quite large. And it's owned by the Indians. It's managed by the Indians. But you're telling me that's not part of the river compact? It goes into the Salt River.
It's not part of the river. Either is the salt. Neither the salt or the Gila are part of the river compact because Arizona, they've excluded that from the compact. So that's what I'm saying. This compact, this renegotiation is going to tackle some really big issues that again, the politicians, I don't think they believe anybody's watching what's going on. That's the purpose of our project, is to help people understand the impacts that this compact is going to have on their livelihood.
Where will it end?
Well, there was a video the other day of a comedian who was talking about this, and this was in 2021, and Utah didn't have enough water, and so the governor was praying for water. They said, let's all as a state get together and pray for water. That's not going to work. As much as I believe in praying, that probably is not the way that this is all going to shake out.
Does seeding help, and what's the downside of seeding? Of course, you got to have something to seed first, but talk about seeding and how it's used and what it takes.
So
How many people, does everybody understand what we mean by seeding? But seeding the clouds, go ahead.
cloud seeding is putting a very small particle into clouds that will then get the moisture to coalesce, and it'll drop it in the form, normally drop it in the form of snow. So originally they used silver chloride, and that was silver is not good for fish. So they've stopped that. Again, I'm not an expert on cloud seeding, but I do know that the effort in 2020 and 2019 increased the water yield by about 3 or 4%, which is significant.
But does that take away from water somewhere else?
Not really. Water on this earth recycles about every 8 or 9 days. So the amount of water that we have on this planet is the same amount of water that we had at the beginning of it. We don't create or lose water on the surface. So most of it is in the oceans and in the atmosphere.
Carol has a question, and then my question after hers is going to be, why does the water tables keep dropping? But Carol, go ahead.
I think that should be answered first.
So the water table keeps dropping because water tables are based on inputs, and so the water table is dropping because we're withdrawing out of that groundwater, out of that alluvial groundwater, faster than it's being replenished. So that's why you see water tables drop. And one way to help that is to be more efficient on the surface with your water. So that's one way to help that, and conservation. But the other way is to take some of this water and use that groundwater as a reservoir, a surface reservoir. So and we can do that. There are, again, water rights play a big role in this. So you got to be able to do it legally, but there are ways to make that happen.
And with agreements. Carol?
So 2026 gets here and no agreement is in place. What happens?
Actually, the U.S. government takes over.
Oh, great.
So I don't think none of the 7 states want the Bureau of Reclamation to be in charge. So I think that this will be done. We'll get to a place, but that's what happens.
Oh, thank you.
And 2 hands went up at once. Peggy?
Are there technologies currently available or on the horizons that can take the excess rise of the sea level and move it and make it available in a potable way to land-based communities?
Yes. We are working on making desalination a much more robust technology. It does work. It works well. It's a little expensive, but it's not as expensive as not having it at all. So absolutely, desal, but that does not work for Colorado. I mean, we can't take ocean water, so we're taking that brackish water and purifying that for potable use.
Derek,
Yes, my question has to do not with agreements, but enforcement. It seems to be the case that, this is the kind of area where malfeasance could take place for months or years before, any real enforcement takes place, possibly even longer than political administrations are in power. So could you speak a little bit to not just the agreement or compact side, but the enforcement side of all this?
So that's why I think it's really important that, again, community leaders be involved in this, because they understand the need from a standpoint of both of them. We have a shared resource, so we need to figure out how to make that work. And right now, a lot of community leaders don't understand this, and they certainly don't explain it very well to the general public. So that enforcement is really important. Eventually it happens because somebody like Colorado just doesn't release the water. And if we don't release it, then California doesn't get it. So, but that's like shooting yourself in the foot, because if I don't release the water, then I don't get the energy, the low cost energy that comes out of Hoover Dam, that where I get my romaine lettuce. So you got to understand the interconnects between all of this, and how that, if I make a decision that's not beneficial to everybody, it could have repercussions that I'm not expecting.
wow, Peggy?
Okay, I'm sitting here thinking about the next generation, our interactors that we have in middle school and high school, and rotaractors at the School of Mines. And it seems to me that we have a huge untapped source for setting the stage and tilling the soil now as we're developing these concepts and compacts. And is there a way, as part of this broader strategy, that we could actively engage interactors and rotaractors, maybe even in their high school senior seminars, or something that would engage them, would attract them and grab their creativity and willingness to work within their communities and connect with other like-minded interactors, for example? So there.
Absolutely. So there's kind of a buzz right now about the one water concept. We only have one water, right? This planet only has the same amount of water that we had at the creation of time is here today. So how we use that one water is going to be very important, involving the youth, so that they can, one, be educated about how it all works, and two, allowing them to be creative about how it might work better is an excellent way to do that. Again, I think Rotary is in a unique position to do that kind of work.
The one thing we've not talked about much, Dave, which is all part of this, water, but also electricity. I understand how we drain Blue Mesa Reservoir, which is the largest reservoir in Colorado, pretty much, to run down into Lake Powell to get enough height to keep the generators going. Can you speak to where we are with, and Las Vegas certainly is watching this.
Correct. So you bring up Las Vegas. Let's talk a little bit about Las Vegas. The city of Denver, right now, if I were to estimate how much water they're going to use, I'm going to use about 105 gallons per person per day. That's how I estimate that. Las Vegas is at 35 gallons per person per day. So, and one of the things we can do is, as much as everybody kind of poo-poos Las Vegas, they had like 7 or 8 water districts in the late 80s and early 90s, and they knew they were going to run out of water. In fact, they hired an outside consultant, and the outside consultant said, you have about 6 years left before you don't have any water left. And so one of the things that happened is that they formed the Southern Nevada Water Authority, and that is the agency that makes them all talk together and work together. There are still the 7 water districts, but they all are under the umbrella of the Southern Nevada Water Authority. And so that was critical to get that cooperation to happen. By getting that cooperation, they were able to go from 120 gallons per person per day down to 35, which then, of course, extended the life of their water system by decades. Your other question was power. So power is a big piece of this. There's about 35 feet left in Lake Powell before we have to turn off the generators. So now that's a lot. That's a lot of water that's there. And one of the things that's going to happen this year is that Las Vegas and Nevada, Arizona, and California are going to have to cut back. So by cutting back, then the water that the upper basin states put into Lake Powell and Lake Mead will actually rise. So we'll avert that problem, but we got to come to the realization that we no longer have 15 million acre feet available. We have about 11. And so that's a 25%, 30% cut in
Hello. Hi.
And so we need to be able to come to grips with that.
Senator Kellogg has a question.
Hi, darling.
Tom?
Okay.
Yes,
I'm on
can you hear me? I'm curious.
We're almost there.
Okay, Sandra, go ahead.
Thank you. I'm curious about the South Boulder Creek. Is it fed by the Fraser River through a tunnel by the Moffett Tunnel and then goes into Gross Reservoir?
Correct. So Gross Reservoir is the 17th largest reservoir in the state of Colorado. It holds about 35,000 acre feet. And a lot of that water, there is water that comes from the drainage of South Boulder Creek, but that is absolutely supplemented by the water that Denver brings through the Moffett Tunnel.
Right. Thank you.
Wow. Any last questions?
I have one more.
Go ahead, Sandra.
I had heard that there was some plan or thinking about buying water from Canada and piping it all the way from British Columbia. Have you heard anything about that?
There are all kinds of people that try to do that. The infrastructure involved in that really makes that impractical.
Mm-hmm.
You really have to use the terrain to deliver water. So I can poke a hole from the Fraser River to Boulder Creek, but I cannot bring it. I mean, Pat Mulroy used to talk about bringing water from the Missouri River to Elko, Nevada, so it could drain all the way to Las Vegas. That's never going to happen.
Okay, thank you.
It's too costly. Well, Jim, thank you. I appreciate the invitation to be here today.
No, Dave, it is our pleasure. I thank you. Your wealth of knowledge is fantastic. David, we thank you for sharing your extensive knowledge and concern for this critical issue. And we are going to stay tuned, and hopefully we can get some Rotarians to be a beneficial part of this.
So, and you're welcome to share that paper that I did for Bill Timpson. So I sent you both the paper and the presentation. Share my email address. I'm happy to respond to other questions if they come up.
Be happy to do that. So we're out of time. And again, what a pleasure, Dave. And what, I don't know if I feel better or worse, but thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Next month, we will be hearing from Ken Scott. Ken is a Denver attorney. He's one of 3 members of the United Nations Commission on Human Rights in South Sudan. He's also presented in front of the United Nations on other subjects. He also prosecuted war crimes in former Yugoslavia. So again, we're looking forward to next month's program with Ken Scott. And again, we thank you, Dave Stewart, and we wish you all the very best. And have a wonderful evening.